CIS-332. We're going to do now the second part of section 1, which is primarily the terms. This work is from the outline again. Let's review a couple things. We already reviewed the objectives. As a student, you should always be aware of what you're actually trying to learn and determine. So we're going to use some terms to help us identify those. We already talked about important. We use data to create information. We talked about this chain, bits to bytes. Bytes create characters, group characters together to create a field. A bunch of fields create a record. We put a bunch of records together, we can have a file. Put a bunch of files together, and we have a database. This term isn't used the same as much nowadays, but it's a pretty good analogy in how we got to where we are. Why? And that'll become more apparent as we keep working through the databases, who works with them. We talked about users earlier, and end users, the people who actually experience the database. General concepts, we are creating a relational database. We know how important the primary key and the foreign keys are in terms of eventually when we create our entities and our tables. Those columns, rows, and data elements inside those tables. The web, which functions on the internet. The web isn't the same as the internet. The web uses the internet. We created HTML language to develop web pages, and those web pages can be served out through a web server using hypertext transfer protocol. And what are we accessing from the web? Well, database management systems. It's a way to organize data so that it's easy to access to create information. And information with some cognitive skills can give us knowledge. Alright, then we talked about security too. How we connect to the web using browsers, and then a client gets the information from the server. And we'll talk more about that. Moves on. So here we have a group of terms. An applications developer. It could be for businesses, it could be finance, public sector. The specifications, software engineers, systems analysts, and so forth write programs according to specifications. Application development. The one we're thinking about will probably be the one who will write the application on the back end to get to the SQL, and then the user can view it from the top side. Client server, we talked quite a bit about that. Clients make a request to a server, sometimes called requesters, and the server gives us a service. So the client needs some service and then get it from the server. We talked a lot about data. This is a good little reference. Now we take data and we figure out how are we going to model it, how are we going to look at the data. Okay, so data models don't necessarily mean just relational, they're data models. Elements that standardize data elements. Okay. Database administrator successfully maintains the database environment. Database designer, really, you don't hear this too much anymore. A lot of database designers are database administrators. So here I defined what database design is. Okay, so how we design it. Database management. How do we manage the database system? Computer program, usually maybe a suite of them, designed to manage the database. I'm going to keep terms. A database, an organized collection of data. schemas, tables, queries, reports, and other objects. Okay? Database management system is a computer software application that interacts with the user, other applications, and the database itself. And then there's some more here. We talked about these are the group. We're using MySQL, but there are other options out there. But those are the main ones. Why a dynamic web page? Well, a dynamic web page construction is controlled by an application server, and we look at server-side scripts so that there is some type of software that creates a new page for client-side processing. All right. End user. We talk about an end user, person who ultimately uses or is intended ultimately to use the product. End users, in contrast to users, users are all the people that work with the database. This is a good explanation of information. The whole idea of going from information to knowledge. So I would review that. I'm not going to read that to you. Then to finish up this part, an information server. You notice here they use the word portals. It's get us the information, and an information system would use information server to distribute the data. In fact, they talk about collect, filter, process, create, and distribute data. Networks of hardware and software to do that. Okay, we got a couple more pages to go. This is a good definition here of an incidence. We got two parts here. Independent from a database model, it is important to differentiate between the description of the database and the database itself. Okay? Sometimes you hear the word metadata, which is really what describes the database. The actual content of the database, the data changes often over years, right? A database state at a specific time defined through the currently existing content and relationship and their attributes is called a database incident. What it is right now in time. Okay? Query, you've been practicing queries for the users, structured query language designed to use relational database management systems. Web app, we should be familiar with those. A web browser to access it. What do we access? A web page. We get a web page from a web server, and we have somebody who develops those applications. And our last thing today in this part of the video, there are a lot of skills that go into website design, so we want to make sure we clarify that. And the World Wide Web, again, this runs on the internet. It is not the same as the internet. It just uses the internet infrastructure to move work using those HTML, hypertext transfer protocol, and nowadays a lot of client server representation of accessing data via the internet, the World Wide Web. And that is it.